We are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret society, opposed to secret oaths, opposed to secret proceedings, secret proceedings. No official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome to Conspiracy Corner Podcast, everyone. This is Abe, your host. It is March 22nd, Tuesday, 4:46 a.m. Today was a pretty good day. Went hiking. We did a Tanyard Trail over in Shakertown. 5 miles. And you know that phrase that you hear grandparents say of going uphill both ways to school? That's what it felt like. But, yeah, I mean, out here in Kentucky, it was pretty much a prairie trail, like out on the hills and stuff. Weather was good because 2 days ago, I believe, or was it yesterday? 2 days ago was the first day of spring, the 20th. So, yeah, I mean, we had like a nice cool breeze going. Sun was out. Some of it was in meadows, so that was kind of cool. But it was up and down, up and down, up and down the whole way. So, if anything, I worked out my thighs and my glutes. But besides that, just been watching some branch off show from Big Mouth. Yes, you can judge me if you want. I don't care. I just like adult cartoons called Human Resources, but it's pretty funny. Besides that, that's about it. I had some time. I woke up. I've been sleeping because I went to bed about 9 a.m., got up at about 1 p.m. to go hiking, so my sleep's a little thrown off, but I don't mind to do it because otherwise I'd have no life if I slept all day, even though I work third shift. But had some time. Sammy went off to work, so I figured I'd do a podcast. So let's get into it. Today we're going to be covering Operation Midnight Climax by the C.I.A. Midnight Climax. In a speech before the National Alumni Conference at Princeton University on April 10, 1953, newly appointed CIA Director Allen Dulles lectured his audience on, quote, how sinister the battle for men's minds had become in Soviet hands. The human mind, Dulles warned, was a malleable tool, and the Red Menace has secretly developed brain perversion techniques. Some of these methods were so subtle and so abhorrent to our way of life that we have recoiled from facing up to them, Dulles continued. The minds of the selected individuals who are subjected to such treatment are deprived of the ability to state their own thoughts. Parrot-like, the individuals so conditioned can merely repeat the thoughts which have been implanted into their minds by suggestion from the outside. In effect, the brain becomes a phonograph playing a disc, but on its spindle by an outside genius over which it has no control. 3 days after delivering this address, Dulles authorized Operation MKULTRA, the CIA's major drug and mind control program during the Cold War. MKUltra was the brainchild of Richard Helms, a high-ranking member of the clandestine services, otherwise known as the Dirty Tricks Department. quote unquote, who championed such methods throughout his career as an intelligence officer. As Helms explained to Dulles when he first proposed the MKUltra project, quote, aside from the offensive potential, the development of a comprehensive capability in this field gives us a thorough knowledge of the enemy's theoretical potential, thus enabling us to defend ourselves against a foe who might not be as restrained in the use of these techniques as we are. The super secret MKUltra program was run by a relatively small unit within the CIA known as the Technical Service Staff, TSS for short. Originally established as a supplementary funding mechanism to Artichoke project, MKUltra quickly grew to a mammoth undertaking that outflanked earlier mind control initiatives. Now let's look into Artichoke project real quick. Project Artichoke, or Operation Artichoke, was a Central Intelligence Agency project that managed the research interrogation methods. Preceded by Project Bluebird, Artichoke officially arose on August 20th, 1951. We're going to look into Bluebird also. And was operated by the CIA's Office of Scientific Intelligence. The primary goal of Project Artichoke was to determine whether a person could be involuntarily made to perform an act of attempted assassination. The project also studied hypnosis, forced morphine addiction, and subsequent forced withdrawal, and the use of other chemicals including LSD to produce amnesia and other vulnerable states in subjects. Project Artichoke led to Project MKUltra, which began in 1953. Artichoke was a mind control program that gathered information together when the intelligence divisions of the Army, Navy, Air Force, and FBI. In addition, the scope of the project was outlined in a memo dated January 1952 that asked, can we get control of an individual to a point where he will do our bidding against his will and even against fundamental laws of nature such as self-preservation? Project Artichoke was the Central Intelligence Agency's secret code name for carrying out in-house and overseas experiments using LSD, hypnosis, and total isolation as forms of psychological harassment for special interrogations on human subjects. At first, agents used cocaine, marijuana, heroin, peyote, and mescaline, but they increasingly saw LSD as the most promising drug. The subjects who left this project were fogged with amnesia, resulting in faulty and vague memories of the experience. In 1952, LSD was increasingly given to unknowing CIA agents to determine the drug effects on unsuspecting people. One record states that an agent was kept on LSD for 77 days. God damn. Artichoke researched the potential of dengue fever and other diseases. A declassified Artichoke memo read, quote, not all viruses have to be lethal. The objective includes those that act as short-term and long-term incapacitating agents, unquote. The CIA disputed which department would take over the operation. Finally, it was decided that an agent from the CIA research staff, former U.S. Army Brigadier General Paul F. Gaynor, would oversee it. The CIA sought to establish control over what is perceived as the weaker and less intelligent segments of society, or for potential agents, defectors, refugees, POWs, and others. CIA report states that if hypnosis succeeded, assassins could be created to assassinate a prominent, redacted politician, or if necessary, an American official. Sound familiar? The overseas operations took place in locations throughout Europe, Japan, Southeast Asia, and the Philippines. Teams were assembled to manage these operations, and they were told to conduct at the overseas bases operational experiments utilizing aliens as subjects. So there you have it. There's Project Artichoke 2, just a little summary. The internecine conflict grew to the point where the Office of Security decided to have one of its people spy on the TSS. This set off a flurry of memos between the security informant and his supervisors, who were dismayed when they learned that Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, the chemist who directed the MKULTRA program, had approved a plan to give acid to unwitting American citizens. The Office of Security had never attempted such a reckless gesture. Though it had its own idiosyncrasies, Artichoke operatives, for example, were attempting to have a hypnotized subject to kill someone while in a trance. Whereas the Office of Security utilized LSD as an interrogation weapon, Dr. Gottlieb had other ideas about what to do with the drug. Because the effects of LSD were so temporary, in contrast to the fatal nerve agents, Gottlieb saw important strategic advantages for its use in covert operations. For instance, a surreptitious dose of LSD might disrupt a person's thought process and cause him to act strangely or foolishly in public. A CIA document notes that administering LSD, quote, to high officials would be a relatively simple matter and could have a significant effect at key meetings, speeches, etc. But Gottlieb realized there was a considerable difference between testing LSD in a laboratory and using the drug in clandestine operations. In an effort to bridge the gap, he and his TSS colleagues initiated a series of in-house experiments designed to find out what would happen if LSD was given to someone in a normal life setting without advance warning. They approached the problem systematically, taking one step at a time, until they reached a point where the outsiders were zapped with no explanation whatsoever. First, everyone in technical services tried LSD. They tripped alone and in groups. A typical experiment involved two people pairing off in a closed room where they observed each other for hours at a time, took notes, and analyzed their experiences. As Gottlieb later explained, quote, there was an extensive amount of self-experimentation for the reason that we felt that at first hand, knowledge of the subjective effects of these drugs was important to those of us who were involved in the program. When they finally learned the hallucinogenic ropes, so to speak, they agreed among themselves to slip LSD into each other's drinks. The target never knew when his turn would come. Oh my God! But as soon as the drug was ingested, a TSS colleague would tell him so he could make the necessary preparations. Jesus. Which usually meant taking the rest of the day off. Yeah, you think? Initially, the leaders of MKUltra restricted the surprise acid test to TSS members. But when this phase had run its course, they started dosing other agency personnel who had never tripped before. Nearly everyone was fair game. Jesus Christ. And surprise acid trips became something of an occupational hazard among CIA operatives. Nice. Such tests were considered necessary because foreknowledge would prejudice the results of the experiment. Can you imagine just going to work and, hey, buddy, I'll get you a cup of coffee? You know, and next thing you know, like Mickey Mouse is coming out from behind your desk like, hey there, Abe. How are you doing? You doing okay? Like, no, I don't feel so good right now. Are you supposed to be there? Indeed, things were getting a bit raucous down at the headquarters. When security officials discovered what was going on, they began to have serious doubts about the wisdom of the TSS game plan. Morale reservations were not paramount. It was more a sense that MKUltra staff had become unhinged by the hallucinogen. The Office of Security felt that the TSS should have exercised better judgment in dealing with such a powerful and dangerous chemical. The straw that broke the camel's back came when a security informant got wind of a plan by a few TSS jokers to put LSD in the punch served at the annual CIA Christmas office party. A security memo dated December 15, 1954, noted that acid could produce insanity for periods of 8 to 18 hours and possibly for longer. The writer of this memo concluded indignantly and unequivocally that he did not recommend testing in the Christmas punch bowls usually present at the Christmas office parties. Man, I don't know. I ain't gonna lie. I kind of want to get a job at the CIA. It sounds kind of fun. Oh God, they're gonna cut that and turn that one against me. Oh my God, someone's gonna. There you go. Did you hear that? Abe said he wanted to be CIA. No, I just want to do LSD. Sounds fucking fun. The purpose of these early acid tests were not to explore mystical realms or higher states of consciousness. On the contrary, the TSS was trying to figure out how to employ LSD in espionage operations. Nevertheless, there were times when CIA agents found themselves propelled into a visionary world, and they were deeply moved by the experience. One MKUltra veteran wept in front of his colleagues at the end of his first trip. "I don't want to leave it," he explained. "Aw. I felt I would be going back to a place where I would be able to hold on to this kind of beauty." His colleagues assumed he was having a bad trip and wrote a report stating that the drug had made him psychotic. No, it sounds like he had a beautiful fucking trip. Adverse reactions often occur when people were given LSD on an impromptu basis. Gee, you think? On one occasion, a CIA operative discovered he had been dosed during his morning coffee break. Told you, I knew it. Told you. Never trust your friend's coffee, or else Mickey Mouse comes around. He sort of knew he had it, a fellow agent recalled, but he couldn't pull himself together. Somehow, when you know you've taken it, you start the process of maintaining your composure. But this grabbed him before he was aware, and it got away from him. Then he got away from them and fled across Washington, stoned out of his mind, while they searched frantically for their missing comrade. He reported afterwards, the TSS man continued, that every automobile that came by was a terrible monster with fantastic eyes, out to get him personally. Each time a car passed, he would huddle down against the parapet, terribly frightened. It was a real horror for him. I mean, it was hours of agony, like being in a dream that never stops with someone chasing you. Incidents such as these reaffirmed to the MKUltra crew just how devastating a weapon LSD could be. But this only made them more enthusiastic about the drug. They kept springing it on people in a manner reminiscent of the ritual hazing of fraternity pledges. It was just too damned informal, a TSS officer later said. We didn't know much. We were playing around in ignorance. We just naive about what we were doing. Such pranks claimed their first victim in November 1953, when a group of CIA and Army technicians gathered for a 3-day work retreat at a remote hunting lodge in the backwoods of Maryland. On the second day of the meeting, Dr. Gottlieb spiked the after-dinner cocktails with LSD. As the drug began to take effect, Gottlieb told everyone that they had ingested a mind-altering chemical. By the time the group had become boisterous with laughter and unable to carry on a coherent conversation. Sounds awesome. One man was not amused by the unexpected turn of events. Dr. Frank Olson, an Army scientist who specialized in biological warfare research, had never taken LSD before, and he slid into a deep depression. His mood did not lighten when the conference adjourned. Normally a gregarious family man, Olson returned home quiet and withdrawn. When he went to work after the weekend, he asked his boss to fire him because he had messed up the experiment. During the retreat, alarmed by his erratic behavior, Olson's supervisors contacted the CIA, which sent him to New York to see Dr. Harold Abramson, a respected physician. Abramson taught at Columbia University and was chief of the allergy clinic at Mount Sinai Hospital. He was also one of the CIA's principal LSD researchers and a part-time consultant to the Army Chemical Corps. While these were impressive credentials, Abramson was not a trained psychiatrist, and it was the kind of counseling his patient desperately needed. For the next few weeks, Olson confided his deepest fears to Abramson. He claimed the CIA was putting something in his coffee to make him stay awake at night. He said people were plotting against him, and he heard voices at odd hours commanding him to throw away his wallet, which he did, even though it contained several uncashed checks. Dr. Abramson concluded that Olson was mired in a psychotic state with delusions of persecution that had been crystallized by the LSD experiment. Arrangements were made to move him to Chestnut Lodge, a sanatorium in Rockville, Maryland, staffed by CLA cleared psychiatrists. Apparently, other CIA personnel who suffered from psychiatric disorders were enrolled in this institution. On his last evening in New York, Olson checked into a room at Statler Hilton along with a CIA agent assigned to watch him. And then, in the wee hours of the morning, the troubled scientist plunged headlong through a closed window to his death 10 floors below. That sucks, man. All because people were slipping him shit. The Olson suicide had immediate repercussions within the CIA. An elaborate cover-up erased clues to the actual circumstances leading up to his death. Olson's was eventually given a government pension, and the full truth of what happened would not be revealed for another 20 years. Of course. Meanwhile, CIA Director Alan Dulles suspended the in-house testing program for a brief period while an internal investigation was conducted. In the end, Gottlieb and his team received only a mildly worded reprimand for exercising bad judgment, but no records of the incident were kept in their personnel files, which would harm their future careers. The importance of LSD eclipsed all other considerations, and the secret acid test resumed. Gottlieb was now ready to undertake the final and most daring phase of the MKULTRA program. LSD would be given to unwitting targets in real-life situations. But who would actually do the dirty work? While looking through some old OSS files, Gottlieb discovered that marijuana had been tested on unsuspecting subjects in an effort to develop a truth serum. These experiments had been organized by George Hunter White, a tough, old-fashioned narcotics officer who ran a training school for American spies during World War II. Perhaps White would be interested in testing drugs for the CIA. As a matter of protocol, Gottlieb first approached Harry Anslinger, chief of the Federal Narcotics Bureau. Anslinger was favorably disposed and agreed to lend one of his top men to the CIA on a part-time basis. Right from the start, White had plenty of leeway in running his operations. He rented an apartment in New York's Greenwich Village, and with funds supplied by the CIA, he transformed it into a safe house complete with two-way mirrors, surveillance equipment, and the like. Posing as an artist and a seaman, White lured people back to his pad and slipped them drugs. A clue as to how his subjects fared can be found in White's personal diary, which contains passing references to surprise LSD experiments. Quote, Gloria gets horrors. Janet's sky high. The frequency of bad reactions prompted White to coin his own code word for drug, quote-unquote, stormy, which was how he referred to LSD throughout his 14-year stint as a CIA operative. In 1955, White was transferred to San Francisco, where two more safe houses were established. During this period, he initiated Operation Midnight Climax, in which drug-addicted prostitutes were hired to pick up men from local bars and bring them back to a CIA-financed bordello. Unknowing customers were treated to drinks laced with LSD, while White sat on a portable toilet behind two-way mirrors, sipping martinis and watching every stoned and kinky moment. As payment for their services, the hookers received $100 a night, plus a guarantee from White that he'd intercede on their behalf should they be arrested while plying their trade. In addition to providing data about LSD, Midnight Climax enabled the CIA to learn about the sexual proclivities of those who passed through the safe houses. White's harem of prostitutes became the focal point of an extensive CIA study of how to exploit the art of lovemaking for espionage purposes. Honeypots! When he wasn't operating a national security whorehouse, White would cruise the streets of San Francisco tracking down drug pushers for the Narcotics Bureau. Sometimes, after a tough day on the beat, he invited his narc buddies up to one of the safe houses for a little R&R. Occasionally, they unzipped their inhibitions and partied on the premises, much to the chagrin of the neighbors, who began to complain about men with guns and shoulder straps chasing after women in various states of undress. Needless to say, there was always plenty of dope around, and the feds sampled everything from hashish to LSD. Quote, so far as I'm concerned, White later wrote in Associate, clear thinking was non-existent while under the influence of any of these drugs. I did feel at times like I was having a mind-expanding experience, but this vanished like a dream immediately after the session. White had quite a scene going on for a while. By day, he fought to keep drugs out of circulation, and by night, he dispensed them to strangers. Not everyone was cut out for this kind of schizophrenic lifestyle, and White often relied on the bottle to reconcile the two extremes. But there were still moments when his Jekyll and Hyde routine got the best of him. One night, a friend who had helped him install bugging equipment for the CIA stopped by the safe house only to find the roly-poly narcotics agent officer slumped in front of a full-length mirror. White had just finished polishing off a half-gallon of Gibsons. There he sat with gun in hand, shooting wax slugs at his own reflection. The safe house experiments continued without interruption until 1963, when CIA Inspector John Ehrman accidentally stumbled across the clandestine testing program during a routine inspection of the TSS operations. Only a handful of CIA agents outside the technical services knew about the testing of LSD on unwitting subjects, and Ehrman took Richard Helms, the prime investigator of MKUltra, to task for not fully briefing the new CIA director. John J. McCone, although McCone had been handpicked by President Kennedy to replace Allen Dulles as the Dean of American Intelligence, Helms apparently had his own ideas about who was running the CIA. Ehrman had grave misgivings about MKUltra, and he prepared a 24-page report that included a comprehensive overview of the drug and mind control projects. In a cover letter to McCone, he noted that the concepts involved in manipulating human behavior are found by many people within and outside the agency to be distasteful and unethical. But the harshest criticism was reserved for the safe house experiments, which in his own words placed the rights and interests of U.S. citizens in jeopardy. Ehrman stated that the LSD had been tested on individuals at all social levels, high and low, Native American and foreign. Numerous subjects had become ill and required some hospitalization for days or weeks at a time. Moreover, the sophomoric procedures employed during the safe house sessions raised serious questions about the validity of the data provided by White, who was hardly a qualified scientist. As Ehrman pointed out, the CIA had no way of knowing whether White was fudging the results to suit his own ends. Ehrman recommended a freeze on the unwitting drug test until the matter was fully considered at the highest level of the CIA. But Helms, then Deputy Director for Covert Operations, the number 2 position within the agency, defended the program. In a memo dated November 9, 1964, he warned that the CIA's positive operational capacity to use drugs is diminishing owing to a lack of realistic testing. And he called for a resumption of the safe house experiments. While admitting that he had no answer to moral issue, Helms argued that such tests were necessary to keep up with the Soviet advances in this field. The Cold War refrained from having a familiar ring. Yet only a few months earlier, Helms had sung a different tune when J. Lee Rankin, chief counsel of the Warren Commission investigating the Kennedy assassination, asked him to report on Soviet mind control initiatives. Helms stated his views in a document dated June 26, 1964. Quote, Soviet research is the pharmacological agents producing behavioral effects has consistently lagged 5 years behind Western research, emphasis added. Furthermore, he confidently asserted that the Russians did not have, quote, any singular new potent drugs to force a course of action on an individual, unquote. The bureaucratic wrangling at CIA headquarters did seem to bother George Hunter White, who kept on sending vouchers for unorthodox expenses to Sidney Gottlieb. No definitive record exists as to when the unwitting acid tests were terminated. But it appears that White had the CIA parted ways when he retired from the Narcotics Bureau in 1966. Afterwards, White reflected upon his service for the agency in a letter to Gottlieb. Quote, I was a very minor missionary, actually a heretic, but I toiled wholeheartedly in the vineyards because it was fun. Where else could a red-blooded American boy lie, kill, cheat, steal, rape, and pillage with the sanction and blessings of the All-Highest? By this time, the CIA had developed a stable of drugs, including LSD, were used in covert operations. The decision to employ LSD on an operational basis was handled through a special committee that reported directly to Richard Helms, who characterized the drug as dynamite and asked to be advised at all times when it was intended for use. A favorite plan involving slipping PI, the code name for LSD when used operational, to socialist or left-leaning politicians in foreign countries so that they would babble incoherently and discredit themselves in public. Fidel Castro was among the Third World leaders targeted for surprise acid attacks. When this method proved unworkable, CIA strategists thought of other ways to embarrass the Cuban premier. One scheme involved dusting Castro's shoes with thallium salts to make his beard fall out. Ha! Apparently, they thought that Castro would lose his charisma along with his hair. Eventually, the agency shifted its focus from bad trips and close shaves to eliminating Castro altogether. Gottlieb and his TSS cohorts were asked to prepare an array of bizarre gadgets and biochemical poisons for a series of murder conspiracies, allying with the CIA with anti-Castro mercenaries and the mob. Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser also figured high on the CIA's hallucinogenic hit list. While he managed to avoid such a fate, others presumably were less fortunate. CIA documents cited in a documentary by the ABC News confirmed that Gottlieb carried a stash of acid overseas on a number of occasions during the Cold War with the intention of dosing foreign diplomats and statesmen. But the effects of LSD were so difficult to predict when employed in such a haphazard manner, and the CIA used LSD only sparingly in operations of this sort. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Operation Midnight Climax. I hope you all enjoyed. Please like, share, and subscribe, and you all have an awesome day.
We are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret society, opposed to secret oaths, opposed to secret proceedings, secret proceedings. No official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.